What's up guys, welcome back to the channel, and on today's video, well, I have a good one for you because this is one of the most storied shoes out there. This is a shoe that a lot of people love, so I guess Adidas they've got a lot to live up to when they come out with the next version of this, because you know that if they get this wrong, then they're kind of doing a disservice to the most storied and longest running race in history, the Boston Marathon. And yes, this is the Adidas Adizero Boston 13. Let's get into it. Alright guys, before we get started, I do just want to say thank you to Adidas. They were good enough to give me this pair of the Boston 13 while I was at the Boston Marathon kind of pre-race weekend. So I've had a bit of time to put a lot of miles in this shoe. I gotta say, I like it. Like right off the bat, I'll tell you I like this. And if you are looking to pick up a pair of the Boston 13, you can pick up a pair for $160. And that's a good price because it hasn't gone up over last year with the Boston 12. And also we're going to look at some comparables, and I think you're going to agree that it's a pretty competitive price. So first of all, let's dig into some specs. The Boston 13 has 36 in the heel, 30 in the forefoot for a 6mm drop. Now Adidas has dropped this down from last year. Last year it was 38, 31 for a 7mm drop. And because we have a slightly lower drop, the weight is going to be just a little less. I mean, it's a little less. In fact, in a US men's size 9, Adidas claims that the Boston 13 would tip the scale at 9.17 ounces, which is 260 grams. Now, last year in the same size, the Boston 12 weighed in at 269 grams. However, I don't wear a US men's size 9. I wear a men's size 13. And in my size, the Boston 13 tips the scale at 10.9 ounces or 310 grams. Now, last year, my size in the Boston 12 tipped the scale at 312 grams. So for me at least, I put a 2-gram weight savings with the Boston 13. I gotta say, it's not really noticeable, but I like that we're heading in that direction. Now, before we get into the actual shoe itself, I do just want to tell you that the overall impression of the Boston 13 compared with the Boston 12 is not that different, but it is enough for me to notice a difference and to like the Boston 13 much more. And we'll talk about some of the differences as we go through the video, and we will start by looking at this heel collar. Now, this heel collar is a lot more traditional than last year's Boston 12. Hold on, let's take a look at the 12. Now, if I hold both of these up, you can see that the Boston 13 is a lot more traditional with the padding around the heel collar. The Boston 12 had no padding right at the top of the heel collar and was more of a bolster padding coming around the sides. Also with the heel counter. Now, the heel counter on the Boston 12 was quite rigid. It is still rigid with the Boston 13. Adidas has done away with this heel pull that would flip up on the Boston 12, and now we've got a more simple design on the back. I do have to say that because of this heel collar design, the changes that they've made, I do feel a little more secure running in the Boston 13 than I did in the Boston 12. The next thing I want to show you while I have both in my hands is the difference in the upper. Now, at first look, they look very similar, but they're really not. And Adidas has made some changes to the resiliency of the upper, at least for me, because if I hold this up, can you see that? Right on the front, this happened in my first run in the Boston 12. I started getting wear from my big toe hitting the upper, and it almost wore right through. I have run a lot of miles in the Boston 13, and I don't have any indication of wear on the upper, so I like what they've done. The upper is a very light and breathable engineered mesh. It appears to me to kind of look like a burlap sack, but it actually feels softer than it looks. And did I mention it was breathable? Yes, I know I did, but I want to mention it again because it is very breathable. I promise that no one's feet are going to overheat if you're running in the Boston 13 this summer. As far as overlays go, yeah, we've got the 3 stripes on the lateral and the medial side. Got some reinforcements coming around this toe bumper, standard reinforcements coming along the eyelet chain. Oh, we do have that extra hole right at the top in case you needed to do the lace lock method. I didn't, but I don't really think that means anything because generally I don't have to use the lace lock method. I can think of 1, maybe 2 shoes that I've had to use the lace lock method in order to get a good heel fit. Then we just have a few more overlays coming around the heel. Now, the tongue is something that I really like on the Boston 13. Now, Adidas has changed it from the Boston 12. They have made it just so much better. Now, the tongue on the Boston 13 is slightly thicker than the Boston 12, and you know, usually you're going to hear me complaining about how thick they make tongues, but in this case, it's pretty good. They have made it slightly thicker, and when I say slightly, I mean slightly, but it does the job. It's still a very thin tongue. I think it fits more to what the Boston shoe actually is, like an up-tempo daily trainer. You know, it's very difficult with this type of shoe to kind of toe the line between lightness and speed and comfort, and I think the Boston 13 does that very well. The tongue on the Boston 13 is also gusseted this year. It wasn't in the Boston 12. And we have this lace loop right on the front. So needless to say, the tongue isn't going anywhere. The whole overall upper of the Boston 13 is just very comfortable. So let's come down to the midsole. Now, again, Adidas is using a very similar setup of midsole. Last year on the Boston 12, they introduced Lightstrike Pro, and they're using a combination of Lightstrike 2.0 and Lightstrike Pro Pro. And the same thing is true with the Boston 13. We have Lightstrike 2.0 in the heel. That's just a little denser foam than Lightstrike Pro, and it's going to help aiding stability. And you can see on my pair, the Lightstrike 2.0 kind of tapers off as it comes towards the forefoot. Then we have Lightstrike Pro, and the Lightstrike Pro is most prominent in the forefoot, and then it tapers off as we go towards the heel. But here's the thing. Lightstrike Pro is Adidas's super foam, and in the Boston 13 they've included 13.8% more Lightstrike Pro than they did in the Boston 12. That's a good thing. We want more Lightstrike Pro, right? Of course, sandwiched in between the Lightstrike Pro and the Lightstrike 2.0 are the Energy Rods 2.0. If we look at the bottom, we can see this little cutout with the rods. And then on the lateral side, we can see just the side of the rods here. This is more like a little piece that comes out from the rods just to stabilize that heel. And then another big change that Adidas has made, obviously we're using Continental rubber, but this year on the Boston 13, we're using light traction rubber here on the lateral side. And light traction rubber is the rubber that we see on the Adios Pro 4. You can see the whole bottom of the Adios Pro 4 is light traction rubber, and Adidas has just decided to include a little bit of light traction rubber, probably to save weight, maybe to boost the Boston 13 a little closer to the Adios Pro 4. You know, this is the training partner to the Adios Pro 4, and yeah, I'm here for it. I can't say I noticed any grip difference, but generally speaking, because I live in Florida, I don't really run in the rain very often. So when I'm running on dry cement, yeah, the difference really wasn't noticeable. Now, as I'm looking at my pair, yeah, the Outsole rubber is holding up remarkably well. I am seeing, obviously, just a little bit of grazing on the rubber here on my lateral heel. Not really towards the back. It is a little more forward than I usually see it. But that's okay. I mean, these shoes are going to last me a long time. And then up on the forefoot, I'm barely seeing anything at all. I can see a little grazing on this tiny strip of midsole that is just exposed between the light traction and the Continental rubber, but you know, that's nothing. That's just where my foot lands and then pushes it through. So the ride of the Boston 13, if you've run in the Boston before, especially the Boston 12, the ride is going to be fairly similar, right? You're going to be using it for the same type of runs. Now, I do call this an up-tempo daily trainer, but in reality, the Boston 12 definitely fits to running faster than it does slower. Could you take this out for, you know, an easy 10-mile trot? Yes, you certainly could. Is the Boston 12 going to perform better when you go out for a tempo run or intervals? Yes, 100% yes. The Boston 13 it's made to run fast, and it works better when you run fast. Now, the difference between the poles of a fast run and an easy run are maybe not as extreme as they are on a race day shoe like the Adios Pro 4, but there is a noticeable difference. Now, to be perfectly honest, I have taken the Boston 13 out on a lot of easy runs. Of course, I've taken it out on strides and intervals, but I have taken it out on easy runs, so I really can compare the difference between running easy and running a little harder. So if you are looking for a shoe to maybe put in that work, even a race day shoe, like if you didn't want to spring for those top of the line race day shoe prices, you know, that $250 and up, the Boston 13 is actually going to be a really good option for you. It's going to be very versatile. You're going to have great fun training in it, and then it's going to perform well on race day. I'm pretty confident Adidas is going to sell just a boatload of the Boston 13s. But if you are thinking of picking up a pair and you haven't used a Boston before, you might be looking at some of the other competitors. You know, this up-tempo daily trainer shoe niche is pretty big. A lot of brands include those type of shoes in their lineup. And I think if you're looking at the Boston 13, you might be looking at the Asics Magic Speed 4. Now, the Magic Speed 4 has a bit higher stack height. We have 43.35 for an 8mm drop. In my size, it weighs in at 289 grams. So it weighs 21 grams less than my size in the Boston 13, but it'll cost you $170. So it's $10 more than the Boston 13. Next up, I think we should look at the Saucony Endorphin Speed 4. Now, the Saucony Endorphin Speed 4 has 36 in the heel, 28 in the forefoot for an 8mm drop. In my size, it'll tip the scale at 294 grams, so 16 grams less than the Boston 12, and it'll also cost you $170. So again, $10 more than the Boston 12. Next up, I think we also have to look at the Nike Zoomfly 6. The Zoomfly 6 has 42.34 for an 8mm drop. In my size, it weighs in at 312 grams, so the Boston 13 is 2 grams less than the Zoomfly 6, and the Zoomfly 6 will also cost you $170. So again, $10 more than the Boston 13. And finally, I think we should also look at the upcoming Brooks Hyperion Max 3. Now, this isn't really fair because the Hyperion Max 3 has 46 in the heel, 40 in the forefoot for a 6mm drop. So the stack height is 10mm more in the heel of the Hyperion Max 3 than the Boston 13. But the Hyperion Max 3 in my size tips the scale at 349 grams. So it weighs 39 grams more than my size in the Boston 13. And the Hyperion Max 3 is going to cost you $200. So yeah, $40 more than the Boston 13. So you guys have some choices to make. However, I'm pretty confident in telling you that you will not go wrong picking up a pair of the Boston 13. Oh, hold on. I shouldn't say that you won't go wrong, because if you have a wide foot, you probably could go wrong. For me, the Boston 13 does fit true to size. It fits me like every other Adidas shoe, but it is fairly narrow in the forefoot. It's not too narrow. I didn't experience any hot spots on the side of my foot. It's very comfortable for me, but it's definitely, I don't know, more of a race day fit than a daily trainer. So just take that for what it's worth. But now I want to hear from you. Have you run in any of the Bostons through the years? Are you thinking of picking up a pair of the Boston 13? Drop a comment and let me know. But for now, it's Matt B. This has been my review of the Adidas Adizero Boston 13. Be kind, be happy, run well. See you in a couple of days.